Hello, everyone. Eric Grenier here, and welcome to the 94th episode of the Writ podcast. On June 19th, there will be 4 federal by-elections in the Manitoba ridings of Winnipeg South Centre, Portage, Lisgar, the Ontario riding of Oxford, and the Montreal area riding of Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount. To discuss what to watch in these by-elections, I'm joined today by Philippe J. Fournier of 338canada.com, Politico, L'Actualité. Bonjour, Philippe.
Good morning, Eric.
So, we're going to talk about these 4 by-elections. They are taking place in June. They are not exactly the most competitive by-elections, but the fact that there are 4 of them does add a little bit of something to it. And if you look across the 4 by-elections altogether, the 4 ridings, you have a mix of rural, urban, suburban, and even if you average them out, you get more or less the kind of result we saw for the Liberals and the Conservatives nationally for the 2021 campaign. So they are a bit of a microcosm. We can go that far. We'll go through it riding by riding, but first off, do you have any broad statements about these by-elections?
If there is a surprise during that night, it will be, I would say, a huge surprise. I mean, we fully expect the Liberals to win 2 and the Conservatives to win 2. The margins will be interesting, though, but, sometimes by-election can indicate something, but most of the time they don't. So it's very interesting for us to discuss them, but, will the voters be engaged? I mean, I think the Portage Lisgar with Maxime Bernier running there is interesting, even though Maxime Bernier might not be that interesting. But it's interesting to see how well he will do. But the PPC candidate there lost by 14,000 votes, I believe it was. So I do not expect Maxime Bernier to win, but how much support he will garner will be, I think, interesting.
Are you a believer in by-elections? I do think that they have. They're not. You can't say that because what happened in a by-election, that is what's going to happen in the next federal election. But I do think they're a good little barometer of where things stand midpoint.
It's just that none of these are really close. They shouldn't be close. I read Chantal Hébert this week who mentioned how much, for the 2 conservative ridings, it's conservatives fighting other conservatives. And this will matter in the end for what happens in a general election, probably next year or in 2025. The fact that conservatives are still fighting amongst themselves. I think that's the main story of those 2 by-elections. And, NDG Westmount, I mean, if the Liberals don't win by 40 points, it will be a scandal. I mean, I don't remember the last time that riding survived the orange wave of Jack Layton, so it can withstand a lot of things. I don't remember the last time it was not Liberal. Not in my lifetime, at least. And yours?
No, not. I did go through it, and it's
been
Liberal since 1962.
62, huh?
You
have to go back to Diefenbaker.
Yeah, the big sweep they had in 58. Okay, so let's go through it riding by riding. We'll start with the one which I think is probably going to be the most interesting, which is Portage Lisgar. So Candice Bergen was the Conservative MP there. She has resigned, and the Conservatives have nominated Brandon Leslie. He will be the candidate. Interestingly, he defeated Cameron Friesen, who was the PC cabinet minister, who stepped down to try to run for the nomination. He lost. So Brandon Leslie was able to take down someone who has, at least some name recognition. There's some other candidates, of course, but the other candidate that everybody's going to be paying attention to will be Maxime Bernier, leader of the PPC. He's decided to run there. How much of a race is this really? I mean, there's been some talk of how this is an epic contest between the PPC and the Conservatives. I don't really see that.
I mean, if that's the case, that means we're missing something. Because the PPC, in the polls at least, in the national polls, and even the regional polls, are still hovering just below their level of the 2021 election. So we don't have any data that indicates that there's a PPC wave. We know that at the riding level, sometimes things can be hidden. What's interesting is the shift between 2019 and 2021. Miss Bergen lost 19 points between those 2 elections, and all of those 19 points went to the PPC, which jumped from 3% to almost 22%. So the PPC did eat a bunch of conservative votes in that riding in 2021. but they were riding on sanitary measures, the COVID pandemic. That's gone now. So are they really going to win over like 15,000 voters talking about the World Economic Forum? I mean, I do not know how much sway it has. I understand why Maxime Bernier is doing this, though. This is smart for him. It's the best riding the PPC had 2 years ago. So naturally, he's clearly not winning in both. He's not going to win back both. So why not go there just for the sake of fundraising? But if it's a close race, it could spell trouble for the Conservatives looking ahead to the next general election if they really have a problem on the far right.
Yeah, this is a riding that is southern Manitoba. It's rural. They've held it, at least part of it, in every election since 1957. So it's not exactly a riding that swings around. As you mentioned, the PPC, this was their best riding in the country. It was better than Beauce. It was the only riding where they got over 20% of the vote. Southern Manitoba had very low vaccination rates. There's large like Mennonite communities in that part of the country. So it does seem like that support might have been primarily motivated by that issue. We've seen Bernier talk about going after, wokeness and saying that his is the only real conservative party. I don't know if he really can make much ground here, but what does he have to do for this not to be a failure, do you think?
Here's the thing. I think the goalposts are misinterpreted by a lot of people, including smart people that I respect commenting on politics. It doesn't matter if Maxime Bernier wins or loses a seat. Of course, he would like to win it, but as long as he gets himself a six-figure salary from political donations that are tax deductible, it's a win. Maxime Bernier doesn't have to win a seat for it to be a success. He just has to do okay and to be in the media and to get quoted all the time. It's exposure. It's purely exposure. He's not going to win. But okay, let's say would that if they go from 22% in 2021 to, let's say, I don't know, 8%. Okay, that will look bad. But if Maxime Bernier gets his political donations, it will be a success. The flip scenario of that, let's say he gets 25 to 30%. Now there's something going on that we're clearly missing in the data.
Yeah, that'll be what I think that he wants. I can't imagine he believes he can swing 30 points between the Conservatives and the PPC. But yeah, showing the relevance of the party, because it has become irrelevant during the last election because it was starting to do well in the polls. There were some polls that had them in the high single digits. A couple of them had them in the teens. So it was the IBR polls that were maybe a bit too enthusiastic. But the party has fallen off the radar. No one's paying attention to the PPC anymore.
If we look at not the percentages but the raw votes, the People's Party had just under 10,000 votes in that election, 2021, for 22%. Let's say they keep those people. Let's say he gets 10,000 votes. In a by-election, it will be far more than 22%. Mm-hmm. I mean, it reminds me of Annemie Paul in Toronto Centre. In the by-election, she had done okay. But, all the Greens voted for her. And what happened in the general election, all the same Greens voted for her, but more people voted and not more Greens voted. So I will be very interested to see that raw number, not that percentage, to see if his supporters are still backing him. Because Monsieur Poilievre has been gunning for that PPC vote. I mean, the way he talks again about wokeness, how he will shut down the CBC, well, not shut down the CBC, but defund the CBC, will not allow any of his future ministers, cabinet ministers, to go to the World Economic Forum. This is catnip for the PPC. So this is the indicator that whether Monsieur Poilievre has done a good job convincing PPC voters to go into his fold.
And one of the reasons that Leslie was able to win the nomination was that he went after Friesen for his COVID-era policies because he was the health minister at the time. So there's really not much of an opening for the PPC because on COVID-19, Leslie's pretty much the same position that the PPC would be, maybe a milder version of it. And Poilievre is not exactly a woke warrior. So I don't see much of an opening. I did ask that we do some over-unders for these. Do you want to do one for the Conservatives or the PPC?
You know what? Why don't you go ahead and I want to know what your line is because I don't know. It depends on where the line is. Where would you
Okay.
put the line?
Well, I'm going to do. I have a line for both the Conservatives and the PPC. So why don't we do one for the Conservatives?
All right.
I'm going to put the line at 55%. So they got
Oh,
52.5% last time.
yeah.
My thinking is, Poilievre's doing better in the polls. He's doing pretty well in the prairies. So I would expect that he should be able to improve that score in 2019 and 2021. What do you think of my line, and what would you take?
Did you say 55%?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think that's an easy over. I'll slam the over, and I think your line is too generous. I would have put the line at 60 to make it difficult. Uh, I'll say between 55 and 60% for the Conservatives. You know, they're motivated right now. I mean, they're coming out, and again, the polls show that even though Pierre Poilievre is not that much higher than 34%, the score that they had in the last election. Other parties seem to be a bit depressed, and he's riding high in the seat projections. So uh, they should be able to get their vote. Plus, if you're a New Democratic or Liberal voter in that riding, do you really bother going voting in the by-election? So I will slam the over on this one.
Okay. Yeah, the NDP got 13%. The Liberals got 11%. I guess I would also take the over. I think it is going to just be primarily a two-horse race, and so both parties could do better, the Conservatives especially. Okay, but what about the PPC? Do you want to do a line or?
Okay. Let me think about this. They had 22% in an election during COVID. Now COVID is gone, so it should be lower, but it's the leader. It's Maxime Bernier. Uh, I'll say 16%. That's my line.
Okay.
16% for the PPC. What do you
Yeah, I
think?
put the line at 15, so I think that's good.
Okay. Okay.
I feel like this is going to get a lot of national attention. And we've already seen lots of newspaper articles about
Right.
it. So Maxime Bernier is probably going to be, out of all of these by-elections, probably the top five in terms of renown across the country at least.
Right.
So I think that will benefit him quite a bit. They're probably going to put a lot of resources into it. The party does have some money. It's not a broke party or anything like
That's
that.
right. That's right.
So I think I'll take the over. I think that I could see them doing around 18, 19%. Not enough that it's a disaster in terms of their dropping of support, that it looks like the PPC is losing steam, but also not really enough for them to say that they are taking on the Conservatives or holding their vote from 2021.
Well, we have a problem because I agree. That means we have to redo the lines because we can't agree on both.
Okay. All right. Well, then what if we put the line at 21.6%, what they got last time?
It's a by-election, so they could come out, the same people could come out, and it would be a greater share. 21.6, I'll take the under. I think they get a good score. I don't think they match that score.
Again,
You
I
agree
think so.
too?
So maybe
Oh
the line
no!
needs to be like 19. Maybe 19 is the right line. I think we're
Nine,
we're zeroing in on what we think they're going
we
to
are
get. So
okay. 19, I will take the under.
okay, all right. I think I would take the over. I think that there will be
Let's do
enough
that.
of a concentration that the PBC might be able to get 19.5. I think they're going to, maybe we'll be wrong. They'll get 30%, and the Conservatives will still get 60.
Yeah.
But I can imagine that they'll just drop below the 20% mark. That would be a nice little psychological threshold for them. So, all right. So that's
We did
Portage,
it. That wasn't
Lisgar.
easy. Oh boy.
Yeah. All right. So let's move a little bit north to Winnipeg South Centre. So this was the riding that was occupied by Jim Carr, who passed away. The Liberals have nominated his son, Ben Carr, to try to step into his father's footsteps. The Liberals have held this since 2015, so this was a Conservative riding in the Harper majority in 2011. The Liberals got 45.6%, the Conservatives got 28%, the NDP 21%. What's your take on this? Is this actually as safe as maybe it looks like it was in the last election?
Before the Conservatives won it in 2011, I think it had been since the 70s, right? That the Conservatives, it was Mulroney the 80s maybe that Mulroney won that, and it wasn't the same riding, but the same limits. It's been liberal for the whole 21st century except for that 2011 election. So this is a really good riding for the Liberals, and there's some people will say it's cheesy, but the fact that it's Jim Carr's son that takes over, there's sentimental here. We've seen this in Quebec. The riding of Jacques Cartier in the West Island. His name escapes me right now, but when he resigned, his son took over and he won easily. So there's something sentimental about this. So it should be a safe Liberal seat. With the Conservatives in second place. Will they keep that same? Did you say 45 to 28? It was
46 to 28. Yeah.
Okay, so 18 points. Maybe that 18 points will shrink a bit because of what we saw in the polls. But we also said that about the by-election in Mississauga. We thought that the numbers would be closer, but the Liberals won it easily. So it is an urban riding where the Liberals should do very well. So, if I had to put a line, I would put the line at maybe 44% for the Liberals, and I would probably take the over. So unless there's a huge surprise there.
All right. If you put the line at 44, I think I would take the under.
You would, huh? Okay.
Yeah, because I think that the Liberals are losing some ground in terms of their support, particularly in Western Canada. Maybe Ontario, they've held up a little bit better than they have elsewhere. There's also the upcoming provincial election in Manitoba where the NDP is doing quite well. So I can imagine the NDP may be eating into a little bit of the Liberal support. So I would take the under. Not much. I think they would still get over 40%, but I do kind of expect that it will be less of the vote because of just the fact that it is a bit of a low ebb, I would say, for the Liberals of the last little while.
True. Yeah. That's true.
What about the notion, though, that is this like Mississauga Lakeshore, you could line up the ridings, and it was one of the ridings that the Conservatives needed to win if they form a majority government or a big minority. Could you say anything similar about Winnipeg South Centre? Do they need this kind of riding to form a government?
Well, if I look at the history of the riding, from 88 to 2011, it was Liberal. So the only majority since 88, no, that's not true. Mulroney won in 88, right? So only Harper majority won that riding. So you could say that to win a majority, they need that one. Maybe not to win an election, maybe a strong minority, but to win a majority, precedent says they have to win this one. So I would rank it much higher, or rather much lower for the Conservatives in terms of priority than Mississauga Lakeshore. But should Poilievre win a majority, let's say, 175 seat or 180 seats, this would be very close. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I think if we see that the Conservatives are close, that would be a bit of an indication that the Conservatives might be in the kind of territory where they're talking about 170 seats. But if they're still behind by 15 points or whatever, then I think it's still very clearly minority government scenario for the Conservatives there. So that's Winnipeg South Centre. So again, we're both expecting incumbents to win these seats. But we do have a little bit of an over-under disagreement on that one. Okay, let's move to southwestern Ontario. This is the riding of Oxford. This was Dave McKenzie, who was a Conservative MP for a very long time. He actually ran as a PC candidate back when the two parties were split. The Conservatives have held this since 2004. The Liberals used to win this kind of riding in the divided right era when Chrétien was able to win, 100 of 101 seats or how many ever seats there were there at the time. The Conservatives won it with 47%. The Liberals were second with 21. The NDP had 18. The PBC actually got 11% of the vote here. So this is southwestern Ontario. They do kind of well. So it would be kind of interesting to see how the PBC does. But the big story here is that Arpan Khanna is the candidate for the Conservatives. He is from the Mississauga area. He ran for the Conservatives in Brampton. He got the endorsement of Andrew Scheer. There was a lot of discontent in the riding that this was the national headquarters that was imposing a candidate on Oxford that they didn't want. There was a pro-life candidate who was disqualified. And one of the candidates, nomination candidates who was defeated was Dave McKenzie's daughter. And Dave McKenzie decided that he had seen enough, and he is endorsing the Liberal candidate in Oxford. So that's a a little bit of a side storyline here that is kind of interesting. But do you expect that this will have any impact on the results?
The Liberals have not won this riding against a United Conservative Party ever. Well, not ever, but in our lifetimes. The only times the Liberals won it, as you said, 93, 97, 2000 election against two Conservative parties. Infighting among Conservatives, I mean, it could shave off a few points or maybe turn off a few voters. But usually, Conservative voters, they fall in line when it comes time to vote. So it's still a huge gap. Last election was a 27-point difference between the Conservative and the Liberals. That's too big a gap for me, unless there's we're missing some infighting that is way more intense that we think. So I would say, you know. Maybe a 25-point victory for the Conservatives would not surprise me, perhaps more. Considering that the Conservatives are doing well right now in Ontario in the polls. We saw the Nanos polls, we saw Léger, they all show the Conservative base holding in Ontario, and so I don't expect the numbers to move that much in Oxford.
Yeah, I think that's probably true. If there was an independent candidate, maybe you could have seen something in Haldimand, Norfolk, which is also in southwestern Ontario. You saw how there was a nomination disagreement in the Ontario campaign, and the independent, who had the support of the outgoing MPP, came out of nowhere to win it. But we don't see that kind of situation here. So it does feel like maybe there will be a few Conservatives who could be a little bit upset. Maybe they won't have as many volunteers getting out the vote, so that could drag down their support a bit. But in terms of imagining that the Liberals could suddenly win this riding, it's hard to imagine. It is, in the area where the Liberals made the announcement of the battery plant, so maybe that could help them a teeny bit or something like that. But it's hard to imagine. It's hard to imagine that the Liberals could win this. So if I put the line at 45 for the Conservatives, what would you do?
Over easily. They had 47. There's some infighting that will cost them some votes. I'll slam the over on this.
Okay, yeah, there was 11% for the PPC last time, so a lot of that's probably going to go somewhere. So where would you put the line then? Because then if it's too easy.
50. What would you say? 50% for the Conservatives.
I think I would take the under. I think the Mississauga Lakeshore results showed that the Conservatives aren't really getting their vote out in Ontario, maybe as much as they could or should, based on the polls. And I think that the infighting will probably sap them a little bit in terms of their ability to get a lot of the vote out. So I would take the under, but I wouldn't be surprised if they're up a point or two in the riding. But getting over 50, I think, might be a challenge.
I'll take the over. I think they're very motivated to win those kinds of ridings by a wide margin. But again, I mean, it should be close. They're not going to win 60% of the vote. So 50% of the vote will be 3 points better than the last election. I'll take that bet. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So not a lot of drama so far in these ridings. I mean, there is a bit with the Bernier candidacy in Portage Lisgar. Okay, we'll get to the last one in Montreal, which is Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, Westmount. This is a very safe Liberal riding. As I mentioned, it's been Liberal since 1962. The NDP won a portion of it in 2011, but mostly the NDG part. But the Westmount part has been Liberal, and it's almost stereotypically Liberal when people talk about the Liberals on the island of Montreal. So this is Marc Garneau, who, as everybody knows, former astronaut, cabinet minister, resigning. And the Liberals are running Anna Gainey, who is the former party president. She's also the daughter of Bob Gainey, who is obviously well liked in Montreal. One of the other candidates here, though, that is an interesting one is Jonathan Pedneault, who is one of the co-leaders of the Green Party. He's going to be running here. So in the last election, the Liberals got 54%, the NDP got 19%, the Conservatives got 14%, the Bloc got 5%, and the Greens got 4%. So for Pedneault, it's a big mountain to climb. What are you expecting here? What do you think about this one?
Well, here's the thing, though. In 2019, I remember I covered that election for L'Actualité, and we even had a podcast where we received the candidate for the Greens. His name was Robert Greene, and he had 11% of the vote. So could, in a by-election where turnout is low, you have the co-leader of the party, who's not a very well-known figure in Quebec, but he could eventually become it. Could the Greens take 15%? I could see that. It's just this is an automatic Liberal seat. Marc Garneau's his vote share has not changed very much during his 3 terms. I think he went from 57 to 53%, 54%. So
He almost lost it in 2011, though. If I remember, it was pretty
well,
close.
against the NDP during
Yeah.
the Orange Wave, right? That was a freak election. We have to take this election and always
It's that
put an
19 out of
asterisk.
20. It's that 20th election.
That's right. Which line would you want to play on this one? I'm guessing Liberal and Green, right?
Yeah.
Um, the Green vote, that's the thing. The Greens have not been a force in federal politics in a while. Some would say ever, but I wouldn't say ever. They had better results in the Harper era than they do now. Um, if I said 10% for the Greens, would you say over or under?
10 is where I also set it. So that's, I don't know. It's really tough to say because, as you mentioned, they got 11% when they had one of their deputy leaders run.
That's
I think
right.
he was the leader of, he was the Quebec kind of lieutenant. Back in the day, if you remember during the Scott McKay years, the Quebec Greens could actually do pretty well here. They often, I think they, not second, maybe once they finish second, but they would do in the low teens in this area.
Right.
But I think it's going to be tough. I think that the Greens have a lot of trouble getting attention, particularly in Quebec. Quebec is probably one of the worst provinces in terms of the coverage that they get.
Yeah.
So 10% is going to be tough to reach, I think. But if they put a lot of effort into it, I think it's possible they could get over. So I'll take a mild over.
Oh. And I'll take a mild under on this one. The fact that it's a by-election and perhaps they'll motivate the same Green voters. I mean, the last election, the Greens, in terms of absolute numbers, they had 1,800 votes. If they can match that in a by-election, it will be close to 10%. I'll take a mild under. There you go. We disagree. How about the Liberal?
Before we get to the Liberals, I wanted to talk about the NDP for a second. So they were second here. They used to be competitive, in 2011, 2015. They could be a bit closer than that. At the provincial level, who owns this area?
At the provincial level, it's Liberal. Liberal. Yeah, it's wall-to-wall Liberal.
Does the NDP number matter at all?
Well, they finished second in the last 3 elections, but it was not competitive. So I'm looking at the numbers now: 22%, 15%, 19%. It's a respectable score, but it's nowhere close to what you need to be competitive. There's in the NDG part, provincially, there is some support for Québec solidaire, not enough, of course, to win the seat. NDG is very multicultural. The rents used to be much lower than they are now, so it's gentrifying. This is the kind of places where the NDP, in urban areas at least, and Québec solidaire provincially do well. It's just that, if the Liberals don't win by 30, it would be a huge surprise for me. So.
For the Liberals, I put the line at 45.
Now,
let me explain why.
Slammed the over. Explain why, because right now I'm slamming the over. Yeah, go ahead.
Because one of the reasons Marc Garneau might have resigned when he did was that over the last little while he was expressing lots of concerns over the changes to the Official Languages Act. We've seen Anthony Housefather, who's not too far, I think he might be in the neighboring riding, voted against the changes to it. There does seem to be a little bit of discontent among Anglophones in Quebec over the choices that the Liberals made on official languages. So I could see that in a by-election in particular, there might be low motivation to vote for Liberals among Anglophones. There might even be the desire to vote for the Greens or the NDP or the Conservatives or someone else just to take it out on the Liberals. Which is why I'm saying why I put the number as down, as that they would lose support and a decent amount, that they might not be able to motivate their people to go out. So that's why I put it at 45. But given what I've said, you would still take the over comfortably.
I think it was an issue, but at the end of the day, I saw the vote wasn't 300 to 1. I mean, only Mr. Housefather voted against. So it's not like there was one party that says we are against this official language, law. There's no torchbearer here. It's not going to be the NDP. It's not going to be the Conservatives, and the Bloc Québécois will take their 5 or 6% as they always do in that area. So you are right, but we're talking percentages here, not raw votes. So I'm slamming the over. Yeah.
Okay, what did you put the line at?
55.
Oh, then I would take the under. I do think they're going to lose because they've dropped some support. No, they haven't dropped some support. They've held their support in Quebec, I should say. Some polls even have them up a little bit. But I do feel like this is going to demotivate some Anglophones to go vote for the Liberals.
You're not wrong. Yeah.
Maybe Anna Gainey has more credibility on this. I don't know, but I do. I feel like this one might be one where they take a little bit of a hit. Some people take a chance on the Greens just for the sake of voting for a leader. Maybe 45 was too low, but I will take the under on 55. I think that they end up around 49 or something like that.
And I'll take the over. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. When I said what I said about conservative voters falling in line in Quebec, those kind of liberal voters, they also fall in line. So we'll see.
Okay. How about this to finish off?
All
over under for each of the parties. We'll do we'll do all five. Why not? Or 4, 5. Yeah, 5, and we'll leave out the block. Over under. Who do you think does better on average than last time, and who does worse? Who would you put as the ones who end up losing support out of these by-elections when we average them across all 4 of them, and who ends up gaining support?
Okay, let me think. The Conservatives, I think maxed out in Portage, Lisgar. I mean, they might be doing a little better, but not that much. The Conservatives in NDG will take their 14-15%. This is a good question. So, compared to last election, is that what you're saying? Okay. Yeah. Oxford, I think they'll do better. Okay, so I'll rank the Conservatives doing better overall than the 2021 election, and do worse. I have to go to win the NDP, right?
Yeah, they always have trouble in by-elections.
Yeah, I'll take the NDP as doing worse compared to 2021. What about you?
Yeah, I would
say the same.
Yeah, I think so. I think the Conservatives do a little bit better. I'm wondering about the Liberals because I can imagine them. Sometimes they do okay in these by-elections where, like we saw in Mississauga Lakeshore, but sometimes they do okay in by-elections where they don't really matter, but they end up increasing their vote share. And it would really kind of flip the narrative a little bit. So I'm going to say that both the Conservatives and the Liberals end up doing better, and that the NDP does a lot worse because they just are always murdered in these by-elections where they don't they're not competitive. I'm going to say the Greens end up doing a bit better because I think Pedneault will bring them up overall, and the PPC I think will do a lot worse because I think their vote elsewhere is probably going to tank quite a bit. So in the end, I think that we'll probably say that the Liberals and the Conservatives are the big winners. They win all the seats, and I bet you they get a little bit more of the vote.
This is not a knock on Monsieur Pedneault, but I have to say in Quebec, he's a complete unknown, except for those who really follow politics closely. Perhaps this is a chance, not redemption, of course, that's not the right word, but perhaps this is a chance to have his face sur les poteaux and to see his face and to have his name in the media. Perhaps this would help, but as of right now, I mean, he could walk down the street, nobody would know who he is.
It helps as well that it's in Montreal. The media is right there.
True.
There'll probably be, a couple stories about his campaign. I imagine he'll get his face on TV many more times over the next few weeks than he has since he became the co-leader. So it is a huge opportunity for him. But in terms of getting into the House, no, it's not going to happen. I think we can. If you had to choose one seat that ends up being an upset, which one would it be?
One upset. If there is one upset of the 4, I like a really, really close race in Winnipeg South Centre. I think that's the one I would pick. I don't see the other ones flipping. but even that is a long shot.
Yeah.
Of the four, what would you say?
I think so too. I think that's the best chance of an upset, but I'd still probably put it at like a 5% chance. And maybe in a weird universe, I could imagine that Bernier ends up winning in Portage Lisgar, but I would still put that. I would put that as the second most likely outcome out of upset. But like again, we're probably talking a decimal point, and maybe Willie Crow, but I don't think so.
If Maxime Bernier wins, we'll have to do a whole podcast about that because it flips a huge narrative. I don't think it will happen. I don't think he has what it takes, and I don't think this riding. I mean, yes, he did with 22%, but he still lost by 30 points. But let's say in a parallel universe, he does win. Suddenly, Papoualiev and the Conservatives have a problem on their hands because that means he would be at the debate and he would probably get a lot more exposures than he will now, and that would eat up some Conservative support. Papoualiev will be, called a woke, of course, by those people. So these lines kind of seem to be working in places. But I don't think it will happen. So
yeah, no, and also I think that it would probably push the Conservatives to go further to the right because they'd be spooked by the rise of the PPC, and then that would probably end up losing them support overall. So the Bernier winning would probably be the best outcome for the Liberals, I would say, easily. And the worst thing that the Conservatives, they'd probably rather lose Oxford than see Bernier win in Portage Lisgar. Okay, so those will be the by-elections on June 19th. We, of course, have another election coming before that on May 29th.
Oh, is there one? Oh, really? I haven't heard about it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, Alberta. Right.
Yeah. So if you want to hear us talk about the polls, because there's been quite a few of them all over the place lately, you'll have to subscribe. We'll have a subscribers-only episode going up early next week. I'm really looking forward to talking to you about that because the polls have been interesting. Let's put it that way.
Absolutely. And since the debate is on Thursday night, we should early next week see some post-debate numbers. Maybe not. We'll see. But this is the long weekend, though. But yeah. I'm looking forward to see if the numbers move at all after the debate.
Yeah, very exciting. All right. Well, thanks very much, Philippe. Enjoy the long weekend, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Merci beaucoup, Eric. Talk to you soon.